Good evening. Welcome to the August 23rd, 2022 Development Review Commission hearing. The purpose of the Development Review Commission was created to hold public meetings and hearings to provide analysis and recommendations to the City Council regarding general land use policies and applications where the Commission has recommendatory power and to render final decisions on specified applications where the Commission has final decision-making power, including but not limited to all aspects of a proposed and future development. The Development Review Commission recognizes that the creation of a desirable environment through the city for residents, businesses, and industry is a prime requisite for the interdependence of land values, aesthetics, and good site planning by promoting harmonious, safe, attractive, and compatible development that is therefore considered to be in the best interests of public health, safety, and general welfare. Appeals of the Development Review Commission decision. Any person aggrieved by a final decision of the Development Review Commission may file an appeal to the General Council, to the City Council within 14 calendar days after the Development Review Commission has rendered its decision. And if you don't know if you're aggrieved, see staff and they'll tell you whether you're aggrieved or not. The Development Review Commission recommendations to the City Council are not final decisions. The members that are with us tonight, from my right, Commissioners Michelle Schwartz and Don Casano, Vice Chair Andrew Johnson, I'm Chairman Mike DiDomenico, and from the far left, Commissioners Joe Forte, Linda Spears, and Barbara Lloyd. With us from staff this evening, Jeff Temulevich, Ryan Levesque, Steve Abrahamson, Saparna Dasgupta, Diana Kaminsky, Karen Stovall, Obinia Kingsby II, Joanna Berry, and Eddie Garcia handling control of our media. During tonight's public hearing, because it appears we have several members of the public who have appeared and wish to be heard, you'll be given up to 3 minutes to speak. Staff will assist through the little light bulb system up front in monitoring your time. Please note that for those who have joined us by WebEx chat, the chat is not monitored or moderated. It's just there for your viewing pleasure, but we cannot respond to messages you may wish to send, and you cannot use WebEx to participate and give your opinions during the meeting. With that, during our study session, we went through tonight's agenda. And the first item of business is we have 2 sets of minutes, both for our meetings of August 9th, 2022. I don't believe we had any edits or changes, so we're going to be voting on those as drafted. And I will hear a motion for approval.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Casano.
I would make a motion for approval of the Development Review Commission study session minutes of August 9th, 2022, and the regular meeting of the Commission August 9th, 2022.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. By a show of hands, all those in favor? And opposed and abstaining? One abstention. The record will show that Commissioner Lloyd was not present for that meeting. Those minutes are approved. In study session, we discussed the 4 remaining items on our agenda, and it is the pleasure of the Commission to have items 3 and 4 voted on in a single motion for approval as a part of our consent agenda. Is there anyone here opposed to those 2 cases who wishes to be heard? Get my attention? Okay, seeing none, we have no cards. Those 2 items will be voted on in a single motion as our consent agenda. Do I have a motion for approval of said agenda?
I move for the approval of the consent agenda.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Commissioner Schwartz, thank you very much. All those in favor by a show of hands? Opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda is approved 7-0. Thank you very much, everyone. That brings us to item number 5. This is a zoning map amendment request for the Butler Gray House located at 1220 South Mill Avenue. And Ryan represents this case for the city.
Good evening, Commission. Ryan Levesque, Deputy Director, Community Development Department, here on behalf of the representing the property owner, Ken Mouchette, the Mouchette Revocable Trust. This application request consists of a zoning map amendment from R2H, multifamily residential district with an historic overlay designation, and removal of that portion of the historic overlay property designation on the rear half of the new lot, approximately 0.08 acres, for the Butler Gray House. The property is situated near the northwest corner of Mill Avenue and 13th Street, as you see on the screen here. Property zoned in this area is R2, multifamily. And this specific property has a historic designation on the property for the historic home, which is the Butler Gray House. It's an aerial view of the property. It's a single-family use. Here's some information about the historic property register, built in 1939. Was designated, I want to say, about 15, 20 years ago through our Tempe Historic Property Register from prior ownership, specifically the Grays. The subdivision, the request for the site has a separate application request for a lot split. And we've drawn a line on the lot here to indicate where that lot split occurs. So it creates a new rear half lot that would allow the development of a new single-family development on the rear half of the lot while preserving and maintaining the historic property to the north of the site. The subdivision plat, here's for reference purposes only, is the lot condition showing the split of the lot. We have created a new lot 1 in the back of the property, and the existing home with the Butler Gray House is lot 2. There was additional slides on there? No? So basically why we're here before tonight is this started as a request for the city of Tempe received in November an application for a demolition permit of this historic property. At that time, because we have a historic designated overlay on the property, there is a requirement that it has to be reviewed. Any demolition permit has to be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission. The item was brought forward to HPC back in December. The applicant was not present or decided not to attend the hearing at that time. The commission denied the demolition permit, which basically gave a 6-month stay of demolition for the permit request and an opportunity to basically negotiate with the property owner alternatives from demolition. At the time, we had interim Historic Preservation Officer Robbie Aaron and myself, and we also had the chair and some legal representation where we had the opportunity to kind of consult and meet with the property owner. We met multiple times on site. We discussed alternatives to the code, recognizing this is an R2 zone property. There was the ability to build a second dwelling on the site. The property owner was adamant about wanting to build basically a much, much larger maximized house that could maximize the development size of the property, and estimated wanted to bring forward around a 6,000 square foot property home for the site that wanted to basically maximize his profit for the property site. Ultimately, this information was shared back and forth with HBC at their regular monthly meetings. We consulted on options to consider whether or not there was an opportunity for the city potentially to acquire the property, or potentially for affordable housing purposes to purchase the property, or a rear half of the lot. We looked at all those alternatives, and ultimately we came to a recommendation and consent that we then brought forward to City Council in the form of a resolution that basically was a negotiated deal that if the property owner were to provide us a 5-year facade conservation easement on the property, on the historic structure, the city would initiate an application for 1, splitting of the lot, and 2, removal of the rear half of the lot from the historic property designation, which would basically allow him his right to build that second unit on the site, but without disturbing the historic property that occurs on the front of the property site. That resolution was approved by City Council back in March of this year. And then we went through the application process basically of preparing the subdivision plat you see here. We had a neighborhood meeting back in June. There was about 5 residents in attendance of that meeting, inquiring about the property site. We did have one representative from the neighborhood that had concerns for this request, or for basically providing some level of incentives for someone who wanted to demolish a historic property. That was their primary concerns. We had also the Historic Preservation Commission hearing on this item in August. They unanimously approved the modification to the historic overlay. It was a 7-0 vote. And there was 1 abstention and then 1 absent commission member at that hearing. If the commission has any questions on this particular items, I'd be happy to go into further details at this time.
I think we're probably going to have a few questions. I've got a couple right off the bat. So staff feels that the historic property that would remain after the lot split is a viable single-family residence once the backyard's taken away, or the 15-foot remaining property behind it is left. So we're comfortable with that?
That's correct. One of the extra added benefits to that is that now we've created this separation of any new development. The rear yard setback is 15 feet, so as you can see there, that measurement from that new lot line from the existing structure. Any new structure on that lot 1 will have to be 15 feet away from that property line. So it creates a backyard scenario for both of the houses. Most of the developments or additions you see in some of those neighborhoods have buildings or accessory structures that are built right up close to the property line from the alley. So we expect something similar to that to probably occur in sort of a fashion where you might have a garage setting or a carport where there's a livable space above on the second story of the property.
And to build a second residence on the newly created Lot 1, it would have to front on an alley.
Correct, yes. The primary access would be off the alley, which we have a number of sites and locations in Maple Ash area, and we've actually did a survey to identify where those sites and locations are. There are a number of property sites that have alley buildings, and then there's sites that have accessory dwellings that their only primary access is from the alley.
So that would take away our ability to ever abandon that alley now, because that's really not only its primary access, its only access unless there was a cross easement through the north half of Lot 2 maybe.
There's also plans to have a separate private access agreement between Lot 1 and 2 that allows pedestrian access between the 2 lots for servicing either trash cans, recycling, and receiving mail.
Okay.
As well.
Got it. And are there plans, does the property owner have any plans, or would it be allowed to now create, to combine Lot 1 with neighboring properties? I know you've got what was the Tempe Women's Club building to the south. You've got an alley, but then a vacant lot across the other side of the alley. Could that happen?
Scenario that could be proposed or presented, but this would not trigger automatically allow that type of situation to happen, right? There'd be an additional process.
Zoning change.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
And the property owner had the site on the market for a few months. I think he had some estimated value for the requests and also the options to split it at this time. City Council now has actually approved the split of the property site. So he took it off the market and plans to re-advertise it for a site that either someone wants to purchase the lot with the home or potentially purchase the vacant lot. The owner expressed whether he's not sure whether he's just going to develop the rear lot himself or have someone purchase it to build a new home.
Gotcha.
And at this time, we're not aware of any plans or proposals to build on that vacant lot at this time.
Thank you. Other questions, Commissioner Spears?
I'm confused. Did you just say that the city council has already approved the lot split?
The city council has approved that administrative process of the lot split. That's correct. The request before you tonight is for the removal of the historic overlay designation on that portion of the site, which then basically as a result of that would not require any future review by the HPC if a new home was built on that rear portion of the lot. And the historic designation would still remain on the lot 2 with the Butler Gray House.
But can you explain the 5-year sunsetting?
Sure, yeah, it was, the provision that was, allowed us in the code was to look at some offset value for what's being provided in terms of the process and procedures that was saved as a reduction for the applicant. And the incentive was basically identified by the city as a 5-year term that we could keep on the property for a facade conservation easement at that time. We looked into other values, and we certainly wanted to get a longer term or even in perpetuity, but the property owner was asking for much more value than what the city was willing to consider at the time.
Commissioner Lloyd?
That was pretty much my question, but can you talk about what happens after that 5 years and what the property is subject to then?
Sure. So basically, 5 years, the facade conservation easement terminates, and then you have what basically is today is a historic designation of the property. If someone wanted to, again, revisit this or introduce something new, or if someone wanted to demolish a site, we still have the HPC process protection in the codes to make a decision on a demolition permit by the HPC and create another process if we want to stay the demolition.
So I guess to put it in other words then, if we weren't to do this, the conservation preservation would expire. They could demo it. This saves it for at least 5 years. We're buying some time.
Correct, yeah. If we're unable to complete the process steps we have today, which was part of the resolution agreement to move forward on this request, we would have to automatically terminate that 5-year conservation easement. It's currently in place right now and has been recorded since June of this year.
Thanks.
Commissioner Spears?
But it would still, so if the conservation easement does not exist, it would still have to go through the same process in terms of getting it off the registry to be able to demolish it, is that correct? Or to whatever the hoops you jump through to get something,
That's
to
correct.
be able to replace it. So it's not like it's just going to suddenly go away.
Right.
Thank you.
The goal intent was to hope that we put a conservation easement on there. There's a new property owner that is interested, invested in wanting to recognize that it's a historic designated property and appreciates the value of the historic home that exists there today, and not the current owner that wants to basically just look at improved value of it. This owner had lived in Tempe, and now he lives in California, so he's looking to move on from the property site.
Did the owner actually live in the house?
Yes, for a couple of years.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Thanks, Ryan. I imagine more will come back up.
Thank you.
So that is kind of a hybrid combination applicant and staff report for those who are paying attention to this case. I have 2 requests to be heard on this item. Philip Yates and David Soklowski, if you also wish, if you're out here and you wish to be heard and you weren't one of those 2 names, fill a card out and please get it to staff right away so that we can get you into the mix. Mr. Yates, you want to lead us off? You've done this before, but I'll say it for the benefit of everyone, just full name and city of residence. We don't need an actual address.
Okay, yeah. So for the record, my name is Philip Yates, and I am the president for the Riverside Neighborhood Association. With regard to the Butler Gray House and having it, back in March, it was agreed that we were going to divide it, right, so that it could be built upon. And we, because of that, are able to build 2 residents on the property itself. And that being the case, we, in 5 years, can change that. Whoever purchases the property in 5 years can change the fact that that's what that that is the case. And being a fifth-generation Tempean, I have always felt very jeopardized by the fact that any kind of changing with regard to the property and its value and where it is very much of concern to me and my family. We all need to look at these kinds of issues when we look forward with regard to how we develop, or if even we can develop something. And again, in 5 years, we would be able to change this so that we could either upzone the area, which would make the property more valuable, and they could actually build higher if they wanted to. That would definitely be a problem, a historic problem, as well as a neighborhood issue. So with that, I'm asking that everybody take those concerns in consideration when making your decision on all of this. And with that, I'll close unless anybody has, I'm seeing a lot of new faces here. It's been a long time since I've actually been in front of you all. Last time I was here was before the epidemic. And so it's nice to see some new faces, and congratulations to those that are new. But anyhow, yeah, if anybody has any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer.
Questions, commissioners? Mr. Yates, thank you very much.
Thank you.
David, come on up and
My name is David Soklowski. I'm a resident of Tempe. I just wanted to mention that this is one of Tempe's most desirable neighborhoods, and I think this is a really great opportunity to provide space for new people to live there. So thank you.
thank you very much. Any questions? No? Thank you. Darlene Justice. Ms. Justice.
Hello. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this. I think you all know that the Women's Club is right next door to this house, and which is a real critical place too for us. But I know that the person who purchased the Butler House for some time has been talking about doing this or doing that or having a demolition. I think he's trying to rattle cages too. But my understanding, it was a little hard to hear, is that the historic preservation will go on the, will stay on the Butler House and that property. You're only doing a lot split. The lot in back is the one that they want to build on. And is that where they're giving the 5 years if they don't do, what goes away in 5 years?
So there right now, the entire property, whether it's built on or it's the backyard, the eastern half of the property, is all covered by the designation.
Right.
So what the city has agreed to do is to lift that restriction on the undeveloped land, and it's not undeveloped, but right now
Right.
there's no structures on it. So thereby creating what's called Lot 1 on the drawings, which is about a third of the entire parcel. That will have no restrictions, and someone can go and, per whatever code, zoning code is in place, they can apply for a building permit and, build a 2,000
Okay.
square foot house. But the designation remains for 5 years on the Butler Gray property. So that house, for at least 5 years, nothing happens. They can't come forward and tell us they're going to demolish it. At some point at the end of those 5 years, I think what Ryan told us is that it would be, at that point, they could come back and start the same process that they did a few months back.
Right. Because also, if we don't do this, they can come in and say they want to develop the whole thing, and they can put in something, and in 6 months, they could demo the Butler House, leaving a bare lot. And then they could sell it to the higher bidder or whatever, right? But they could demo it. And so what you're saying, and is this meaning that there's a 5 year that they can't come back within that 5 years and say that they want a demo, that is going to be historically preserved for at least 5 years.
Mr. Lebec will come, my understanding is yes, but we'll have the expert come up
Yeah,
when you're
because
done.
we
and
need
answer
that in
question.
writing, because I'm hoping, because our historic properties are becoming fewer and fewer. And at some point, maybe the city of Tempe, we're doing well, we're building a lot of stuff. We could have a fund that could go and purchase a historic property rather than having it demoed. So at least that gives 5 years, maybe, where now he may just go demo it.
And we'll have your question answered, but it is in writing. So in June, the city council authorized and entered into a written agreement, and I've read the agreement. It was part of the packet.
And it says they can't demo it. That's,
Yeah, and it's got a start and an end date on it. But again, Ryan will come back
Okay,
up and
because-
fill in the blanks.
even with historic designation, they can demo it under what we have now in 6
The
months.
process,
But
yeah.
they're saying that you can't, they won't be able to do that within 5 years.
Which is what they initially applied to do here, and the 6-month stay was put on, and in the interim,
I think
we've
it's
gotten to this
better, I
point.
think it's better than nothing.
There you go. Questions from the commission, from Ms. Justice? Anyone? Thank you very much for coming down.
Thank you very
and-
much.
Ryan, if you could come back and respond to any of the things you heard.
Thank you. Members of the commission, historic preservation was our utmost objective goal here in this request. The historic facade conservation easement is our best tool for historic preservation. It basically does not allow the owner or the property manager of the site to make any modifications to the exterior of the building. All of that has to be reviewed and vetted by the city if there is any exterior modifications of this structure, the Butler Gray House. So that stays on the property for that 5-year term.
They could make interior, for example,
Interior, yeah.
they could remodel a kitchen or a bathroom to make it
Yeah, the
more
conservation easement
livable.
applies to the exterior, all sides of the building, the rear, north, south, east halves.
Gotcha.
So yes, it basically buys more time for someone else to buy it, purchase the property that might have a greater interest in keeping and preserving the home. And we're hoping that's the case, that people aren't just considering that, such the increased values of the properties these days that people just immediately want to go to demolition and build something bigger and newer. We're hoping that this will preserve that time frame to keep and maintain the house for a longer period, longer
And the
term.
time limit runs 5 years from some date in June when this started.
Correct.
So June of 2027
And
would be a.
I will add too that, the Historic Preservation Commission too recently adopted a historic preservation plan. And there are other tools and opportunities that they are looking at, considering and moving forward. Some of them even include potential future code text amendments about longer terms for stays of demolition. Some examples of that we have in the city of Phoenix, for example, is they have a 1-year stay. Those are good examples of future amendments that we can also consider moving forward with future code text amendments that, as a result of the historic preservation plan, that we plan to bring forward by 2023.
Okay. Commissioner Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair DiDomenico. Was there any discussion, given that the lot split created 2 much smaller lots, of downzoning it from R2 to R1? Was that discussed at all?
We did discuss additions, accessory dwelling units, some of the provisions that we had adopted recently because we had properties in the Maple Ash area that took advantage of the accessory dwelling unit provision. The downzoning was not looked on favorably by the property only simply because they saw that as a tool to reduce the site's current allowed density for the site. If we rezone the property from R2 to an R1, there would be a lot of R16 or R1 standards that probably wouldn't apply or would have to get further relief variances from. The minimum lot size requirement for the R2, I think, is around 3,600 square feet. So we are just able to meet those standards requirements for the code.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions, commissioners? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One last call to the public. Seeing none, this will close the public comments portion of this meeting or this hearing for this particular case. Commissioners,
Chairman, I
Yes.
just wanted to make a statement that for all the three projects on the agenda today, the public comments were provided, the written comments were provided to the commission prior to the meeting.
thank you for reminding us that. There were various emails or public requests or comments that were provided to us prior to the meeting that we were able to review and are in the record. Commissioners, what say ye? Don, you're looking like you've got something.
I'm gonna make a motion. If I'm
Well, okay.
ready for one. I would make a motion for approval of the item 5, which is PL 220161, which removal of portion of historic overlay property designation from the new rear lot for approval.
With all conditions of approval
All
as
conditions
as written.
stated in.
Commissioner Lloyd?
I just wanted to make one comment before we vote that I appreciate the staff going to bat to maintain some of the character of the historic nature of this property. You know, it like we talked about, buys us more time. It's not forever, but at least, you know, you took the time to try to keep some of the character in the neighborhood, so thank you. And I'll second it.
There we go. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. So we can have some discussion on the motion that's on the table. I'm kind of torn on this one. I'm concerned that it's that the purpose here is to create an assemblage of property that's going to maybe lead to the loss of another neighborhood or a neighboring historic property, or to do something that's out of scale and context with the surrounding properties on Mill. So in one way, I think the staff has come up with the best compromise to save an existing structure. But I'm just, you know, I pray that we don't regret what happens with the new lot created or any of the vacant land or developed parcels that are adjacent. So that's my comment. Other comments or opinions? Commissioner Spears?
I have a real problem with this. It sounds like that the property owner put the screws to the city, and this is the best that we can come up with to kind of try and protect it. I don't see how this makes sense at all. Again, the house that can be built on the other will not be in conformance with the character of the neighborhood. It's very difficult to recreate that, and it doesn't sound as like that's the objective of this landowner. It's almost like I'd rather see it left as it is and let a new owner try and deal with it.
You know, staff, I did have, Brian, I had a, it doesn't, I don't suppose it matters. Other comments or concerns? Commissioner Forte?
So if we don't vote on this in favor, then it's quite possible that the whole thing can get demolished in 6 months anyways, correct? Or no?
My guess would be, and staff, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would expect that there may be an appeal if we were, well, we're recommending this to council. And so I'm guessing that they will strongly consider going forward against our recommendation because I think this has somewhat been vetted already. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been papered in June as it is. But, you know, I don't know. You know, my concern, how long has the historic overlay been on this property? It wasn't put there by the current owner.
I want to say about 2006, 2007. That's
Okay.
probably when the original historic designation on the property.
So the current owner bought it with the designation in place?
Yeah,
and
it was,
fully aware of it? Okay,
The Gray family, that's the reason why you see Butler Gray House.
okay,
There,
gotcha.
yeah. And to it, we also have the same concerns with the property to the south there. That's locally designated historic property. It's on the National Register as well. And the Tempe Women's Club in its current condition is the most appropriate for that location. It is unique that it's a non-conforming use because it's commercial-esque on R2 zone property. So anything they're planning or proposing there on that site would likely not fit or be suitable for an R2 property site for that small portion right there. They'll probably come a day and time where we have to have that further discussion, public hearings on that item, but for today, we've got the protection of the local historic register and the National Register on that property.
I respect, that's probably well said and to the point. Other comments? We have a motion on the table, so we're really just speaking to the motion that we have.
But I just want to clarify, to go back to that question, if this wasn't already somewhat predetermined in terms of the lot split and council voting on it, had this easement already not been in place, the applicant already went through the 6-month process, and if all of this wasn't on the table, they could demo the structure.
That's correct.
Yes.
June 9th was our last official day to hold the demolition permit, and so it's valid for 1 year. If this item doesn't go forward or doesn't get completed through the process, then they have the potential to start demolition.
Thanks.
If they so choose.
Thank you, Ron. All right, looks like we're ready for a vote. Anybody, anything final? Hearing none. We'll do a vote by show of hands. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Motion carries 6-1 with Commissioner Spears voting against. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to our final case to be heard. This is a request for a PAD, a Planned Area Development Overlay, for a project consisting of 11 dwelling units on 0.59 acres. It's called Tempe 11 at 408 South Roosevelt Street. Come on up and tell us about the project.
Okay. Good evening, members, staff. My name's Tom Gosicki, and is somebody going to bring up something here? Oh, I need to click it first. There we go. Okay, this property is located on the corner of 6th and Roosevelt, northwest corner. This is a rendering of the site standing right in, say, in the center of the street of 5th and Roosevelt, looking towards the property. I'm quite familiar with building in Tempe. I don't know if anybody drives down to Priest or from Priest in. I built 1214 West 5th Street. I built 1300 West 5th Street. And I also built 1301 West 4th Street, right across the alley from 1300 West 5th Street. This is a 3D rendering of the standing up on the north end of the property on Roosevelt, looking south, the corner of the property there. And, let's go into the, here's the site plan and the landscape. And I like doing this on all my projects. I try to, instead of creating just 2 rows of projects, I created 2 or 3 buildings. On the other sites, which were a little bit larger projects, a 15 unit and a 13 unit and a 7 unit, I even created a standalone unit. I think this is more friendly and conducive to single family housing. This is single family attached housing. I also create front porches, which I think are a nice factor to the pedestrian-friendly community kind of feeling. And I have to tell you that all the people on 1214 and 1300 and 1301, they all use these front porches. I put those smooth precast tops on the front porches, and they all sit out there. They have furniture out there. It's kind of a nice feature, and I continued that look here because Roosevelt is, or Fifth Street too, is a pedestrian street. So here's a overview on the corner of 6th and Roosevelt there. Across the street on the east side is a 3-story single-family attached project done probably around 12 years ago. I'm only building a 2-story building. 1300 West Fifth Street was a 3-story, but the other 2 projects were 2-story. I found it's just a nicer build. It doesn't look so commercialized, overpowering, and so forth, to keep it as a 2-story. We have 2-car garage parking. Inside the garage, I offset the garage doors, so inside the garages, we can keep the recycling bin in the garage. In this project, I went over it with the refuse people. We're also going to have single-family, normal refuse bins, and they'll be kept in the garage too, and they'll go out on appropriate days. And the people who ultimately live in the building will be given instructions. And people need to deal with recycling and trash. There's 2-car garages for each one. There's 4 guest parking places. I believe I'm going to take one of those guest parking places and turn it into the word I'm looking for, handicapped parking place. These are just shots of the neighboring community. That was the existing site. Again, just a layout of the plat map of the property. We're going to drive in from Roosevelt, and that's why it's 408 South Roosevelt, because the main drag, the front of the property will be on Roosevelt. And an overlay in the community, give a visual of how it relates to the buildings around it. Front elevations of the A building, which is the 3-unit building on the north end of the property. And the driveway goes down the center, so the garages will be facing each other on the inside of the property. Side elevations of building A. The 2-unit building is building B in the back of the property. Front and rear elevations face the alley, so those 2 garages, they'll drive in from the alley. Side elevations. I try to create it, and if anyone's seen my buildings, I mean, I feel they're pretty attractive, and so there's a lot of people in the community, because I got to know a lot of people on Fifth Street, down at that end of the west end of Fifth by Priest. And I got a lot of movement in and out of the building, and a lot of movement up and down on the building, great architectural interest in the projects. We kind of think that we do some of the nicer projects in the area, small projects. This is the six units that are on Roosevelt. There's a lot of in and out movement in the buildings, and the front porches will all be there. The darker areas on the drawing, the planning people had me move the front porches off the front of the building so we could get a clear picture of the building without the front porches on them. Side elevations. Here we are with our street elevation of trees. If anybody's driven by my project, you know, I like landscaping. I do a lot of landscaping. I really like it. Here we have evergreen elms and pistachio trees. The floor plans. First floor has a master bedroom, bath, walk-in closet, 2-car garage. Water heater be set in the garage. Second story, 2 more bedrooms, family room, so forth. And on the second floor, we have that pergola, which all those windows that you saw up in the front is in the living room, and it rises up out of the center of the living room. I have to say, people like that a whole lot. I've done this similar project before, and the people really enjoy all the natural light without all the heat coming in on it. Another site plan of the 2-unit buildings. the Fifth Street 6-unit building. Then we get into defined floor plans. I mean, if anybody has a question about the floor plans or anything, locations, feel free to interrupt and ask while we're on these clicks. Landscaping site plan again. This is actually our grading, underground utility and lighting plan, which is, necessary to get through the planning thing. But I also like lighting. I do a lot of lighting on the projects. I think kind of soft, nice, meeting all the requirements for candle power and so forth on the properties. Renderings again. That's it, gentlemen, members.
In general, you did have a neighborhood meeting,
Yes, I did.
and it was detailed in our packet. I don't recall that there was any opposition or any issues from the
No,
neighbors.
there was no opposition. I'm trying to recall my comments from the people. And I got to say that there really was no opposition. There was a little concern about a more generalized statement of overdevelopment in the community and so forth, but that's not something that I have control of. I mean, the zoning on the properties is zoning, and I have not asked to change the zoning at all. And I just, once I mentioned, I have to be honest with you, once I mentioned to the people at the meeting that I did those other buildings there, and most people have lived here for a long time, they use Fifth Street to get out to Priest and the freeway, so they've driven by the buildings. Some of them actually who hadn't went over there and looked at it ahead of time, and no one, there was only 3 people attended the meeting, and none of them had anything that related to me or the project.
Can you pull up attachment 26? It's kind of the corner from the center of the street intersection looking in.
Uh-oh.
That's the one.
That one right there or the next one?
Is that an accurate representation of the shrubbery that you plan to put in?
Well, yes, I said I really like my landscaping. Probably, if I remember, oh, I can't do that, eh? All right, between the curb and the sidewalk, I don't believe that there's available landscaping space between the curb and the sidewalk. Yeah.
Kind of getting towards, but
There's not.
that is the density of plant material
Oh, yeah.
that you'll.
I do a lot of landscaping. I like it.
Okay. Other questions, Commissioner Lloyd?
On the same rendering, can you talk about your design with kind of the overhangs with the shading on your patios? Is there enough to provide for having it be comfortable out there, or how do you look
Well,
at that?
you mean on the front porch areas to have something over? I don't think that we're allowed to move a covering out there onto by codes. I could be mistaken.
I was just curious if they were practical and usable without shading.
Except I don't think we're allowed to do that, but I could check into it. I have no opposition to something like that. I just don't think they're required to move a structure into the front yard areas.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, the people use it all the time. Not right now, not this time of the year. I'm telling you, if you were to look at any of those other projects, you're going to see furniture out there and people are out there all the time. They like it, the front porches.
Other questions?
This is intended to be a for sale property or?
Yes,
rental property?
they're single-family attached homes.
All right, thank you very much. Sit tight. We're going to have a couple of members of the public come up, and they may have some questions for you also.
Should I leave this set up here, just like this?
Yeah, please.
All right, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Karen Stovall, Senior Planner. So I am going to try to be brief with this. So the site is located at the northwest corner of 5th Street and Roosevelt and is currently zoned R3. The applicant is requesting a planned area development overlay to establish new development standards and a development plan review for a new 2-story single-family attached development consisting of 11 units. This slide is of the planned area development standards that are proposed. So the applicant is requesting to modify the minimum landscape area from the R3 district, which is currently 25 feet, and he wants to go down to 23, I said feet, 25%, and he wants to go down to 23%, and to reduce all the building setbacks, which would be from the perimeter of the site. The front setback would be reduced from 20 to 15, the sides from 10 feet on both the north and south down to 6 and 5, and then the rear, which is actually measured from the midpoint of the alley, from 15 to 13. The proposed lot coverage, building height, and vehicle parking would all comply with the R3 district standards. So the proposal includes 3 two-story buildings, each containing a 2-car garage, and the units on the west end of the site have garages oriented towards the alley. The other unit garages would be accessed by the private drive that's accessed off of Roosevelt Street. The landscape plan, as the applicant explained, proposes Chinese elm trees along 5th Street for consistency with the existing street trees, and then elm and pistache along Roosevelt Street. And then, as you can see along the internal drive, there are small planters as well located between the garages with ground cover plants, and there's a common area between buildings A and B. So the 2-story buildings are 25 feet, 8 inches high, which again meets the maximum 30-foot height of the R3 zoning district. And he's already shown the renderings. There was a neighborhood meeting that was required, and it was held in May of this year. Attendees inquired about the contractor parking during construction, if there would be rooftop access, if the units were going to be owner or renter occupied, the building heights, if the project was going to be gated, and provisions for resident parking, and then had other questions about the floor plans. We, staff, received an email yesterday inquiring about contractor parking as well, and we responded that the city does not require developers to identify locations of vehicle parking for construction teams, so it is up to the applicant and the contractor to determine that. Staff is recommending approval subject to the conditions, and the applicant has reviewed those conditions. The unique condition would be that there are 4 surface parking spaces on the west end of the site for guests, and it has been interpreted that one ADA space would be required. So the guest parking would be reduced from 4 to 3 to accommodate that accessible parking space. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Can you recall any notable concessions or improvements or changes that staff asked the developer to make that they were able to provide?
Well, initially, the project came in with a building on the north and south end of the site, and I'm wondering if I can, no. And they were expecting basically solid waste enclosures, so common refuse enclosure. It worked out that refuse trucks wouldn't be able to service the site by going through the alley and then turning east and exiting on Roosevelt. So the site had to actually be redesigned to accommodate that, because again, a refuse truck wouldn't be able to circulate in that narrow space. And we ended up with this design instead, which we think is actually better, breaking up the building or breaking up the development into 3 smaller buildings versus 2 longer ones. Other than that, you know, the design of the buildings, the building elevations are actually pretty good. We didn't have too many comments about those, except we did ask on the east end of Building A for the front door to be oriented towards Roosevelt Street because the units on the east side of Roosevelt face that street as well. That is something that the applicant did not want to do. Instead, he continued the porch and patio walls around the northeast corner of that building. But other than that, no.
Thank you. Other questions, Commission? Vice Chair?
Thank you. in this image, this is a good image. So on the right-hand side where you show areas for the refuse containers, is that going to be a no parking area, or how will that be controlled?
Yeah, so Roosevelt is actually signed as permit parking only. So right now, only those with permit can park there anyway. But when the cans are placed out there, it's a legal requirement that cars cannot park within a certain distance of the trash cans. So, or trash or recycle, whichever it is. So there's not going to be any change to on-street signage. It's just, it's not legal to park, and block the way of the refuse truck anyway.
So on Mondays and Wednesdays, when these are rolled out there, if there's a vehicle already there, then
Yeah,
have
it would
to
be a problem, yeah.
Around it?
Yeah. Yeah, right now, you can see it on Google Street View, which I don't have, but a certain distance from the intersection of 5th Street North is already marked with red paint for no parking. So I'm going to guess it's probably about half the length of the property on Roosevelt Street as it is. So.
And there's a fire hydrant, so there's no parking in front of the fire hydrant anyway. Okay. I see actually 2 fire hydrants, so that helps. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much. All right, we have 2 comment cards. If you haven't filled one out and wish to be heard, do so now, or we'll miss you. Let's see, we'll go in the opposite order. Mr. Sokolowski, come on up. Mr. Yates, you'll be next.
My name is David Soklowski. I live in Tempe. We have a housing shortage and a severe housing crisis. It's important that Tempe does its fair share to build housing. Thousands of people are forced to commute because they can't find housing here. We need development projects in all shapes, in all sizes, at every income level, and in every single neighborhood. This is a very desirable neighborhood, so we need to provide new opportunities for people to live here. We need to grow the character of our neighborhoods to be inclusive to everyone. So please vote yes to approve this project.
Thank you very much. Questions, Commission? Thank you. Mr. Yates.
Again, I am Philip Yates and president for the Riverside Neighborhood Association. And when this was first proposed to be demoed, there was a lot of opposition to it being demoed because it was a historic house. It was one of the few that were left and are left. And an adobe house, I mean, how many adobe houses do you drive by and see that you can say, oh, that's an adobe house? Well, that was one of them. And I had all kinds of questions as to why this was approved to be demoed. And I didn't have an answer for them. I just didn't have I couldn't supply them with any kind of an answer for that. I don't see anything that could say an okay to that. But in any case, this is a 11-unit proposal by the applicant, and this was a 1-unit on-site place to live. And right now and on Roosevelt Street, the traffic is horrible. It has been a nightmare for people to go or to live on the street. I have an 11-year-old child that I'm scared to death will walk across the street and get hit by a car. And there are people that live across the street from me that have children that are much younger than that. Keep in mind, this is 11 people living, at least 11 people with their cars living at this location. With regard to the looks of this, well, first of all, I have kind of a opposition to, I mean, you don't bring something to the DRC meeting that isn't exactly what it is that you're going to want it to look like. The applicant showed on the sidewalk some of the plants and everything that are right next to the sidewalk and everything. That isn't, and admitted that this isn't something that we are going to be able to do. Well, they showed it to you. And that's offensive to me. Being the president of the neighborhood association back in May, yes, we did have a meeting. We did have a meeting that was supposed to be on a certain date. And at the very last minute, it changed to another time. I didn't know about that. That infuriated me. I couldn't believe that I was not told about that fact. And I certainly would have had opposition to it at the meeting had I known that it was occurring. And I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, really, I think that a lot of the questions would have been answered at that meeting had I attended it. But I was unaware of it. And I think that we should say, because this is, or was an adobe house, was a historic house, and this is going to enable cars, more cars, to just fly through our neighborhood. It's not one, it's 11. That's huge. That's a huge upgrade. Not only that, it's also a upzoning in the area, which acquires, establishes the fact that we could upzone it more in the future. Does it look pretty? Sure. Is it the right kind of a development for 5th Street and Roosevelt? Absolutely not. This does not this shouldn't be here.
Okay.
And I really hope you all vote no against this. And I would be severely ashamed of our, community if we weren't going to say no to this. And that's all I have to say, unless people have any questions for me.
Questions, Commission?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I will ask the applicant to come back up, and if you've got any light to shed on anything, and I imagine we'll have a question or two.
Is some type of response to what everyone has said here? Well, I'm know that the community needs various different kinds of developments, but this is a development that complies to the zoning that the city has on the property. And I think that I've met the zoning requirements, and I've created a project that is comparable to many projects that are in this area at this time. And as far as the gentleman who wasn't aware of the meeting, the city has guidelines for posting the dates on the sign and guidelines for mailing out letters and so forth. And we did all of that. I mean, anybody can look. There's two signs. There's a sign on Roosevelt. There's a sign on 5th Street. And it has the dates on of everything, including the neighborhood meeting. And there is mailings going out. I think we mailed out 220 mailings. And the date did change originally, but we also met all the time requirements and had everything out there. So, I don't know exactly how to say how the gentleman.
What was on the property, the parcel that you're seeking to redevelop, the 0.59
Well,
acres?
there was 3 separate lots. One of them was vacant. The center lot was already vacant, demoed in 2015, 16, something like that. The lot on Roosevelt and that had a 2-bedroom bungalow apartment on the north half of the property, and then a house on the front of the property. And that's the house they're referring to as a historical house, but it was not designated a historical house. Otherwise, I don't even know if I could have torn it down if it was designated a historical house. And then the vacant lot, and then there was 2 One was a one-bedroom, one was a two-bedroom. Everything was vacant and abandoned when we bought the property. And there were a lot of homeless people hanging out there, drug people hanging out there. And that's the reason we demolished it. The stuff was probably in an inhabitable type of condition when we bought the property.
So you never had tenants in any of the
No,
four
we never had any
properties
tenants.
that, okay.
No, it was vacant when we bought it. And in pretty bad shape. And that's the reason I was concerned that with the homeless situation and drug situation in all communities to some degree, that, and there were homeless people staying in there and on the front porches and sleeping there, that, you know, there might be a fire, somebody might overdose in there. So after we got the property, we applied appropriately and obtained the demolition permits as soon as possible.
Questions for the applicant? Commissioner Spears.
One of my concerns about this project is a for sale project, and we've seen this happen on Hardy, where we've approved projects that were single family attached for sale units, and they don't sell and they become rental properties. And of course, rental properties bring a whole different issue to the city. And or if someone buys a unit and then uses it as a rental property, we don't have any kind of central management, that kind of thing. And I know you can't, if you sell a unit, you can't prevent it from, presumably you can't prevent it from becoming rental property. But it seems to be what the neighborhood really does need is rental property rather than for sale properties. Have you thought about that?
Interesting. See, I thought just the opposite. I thought the community, and at the times I've had other meetings, 3 other meetings that I've had with the planning commissions, city council and stuff, that the city of Tempe, they actually wanted to stabilize the area with single-family owned, privately owned individual houses. And I wasn't thinking in the line of apartment buildings. But, economics always comes into play too, as far as what goes on with the project. And I do control whether we pay a certain price for the property or not. But the market controls how much that has to be paid, and we choose to pay that price or not pay that price. And sometimes you build appropriately according to that. And the same with selling them. The market will determine whether these get to be sold or not sold. And when I create the CC&Rs on the property, I'm not a big fan of Airbnbs. So we put in there the minimum rental on the property. You can't take it down to 2 days, but we take it down to, you can't rent for 30 days or less. We figure that pretty much takes out the Airbnb type of rental property if someone chooses to rent it that owns it.
Other questions? Thank you very much. Anything additional from the staff side?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just want to clarify what happened with the neighborhood meeting. So the applicant set a date for the neighborhood meeting and did the mailing, and then decided that he was trying to hit a certain DRC hearing date. And because of that, he did another mailing and updated the hearing signs to meet the cutoff deadline to make a specific hearing date. So there were 2 mailings, one, and then the second one with an updated date. So I just wanted to clarify.
The date got moved earlier.
Say that.
So they moved it earlier.
Correct. Yeah.
The neighborhood meeting.
Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify why 2 letters went out.
Okay. All right, that will conclude the public comment portion of the meeting. I will entertain motions, and we can have a discussion about the item on the table.
Comments?
Go for it.
All right, Phil is my neighbor, or Mr. Yates is my neighbor. I live right across the street from this property. And I agree, it was a very sad thing to see that home on the corner demolished. I watched it happen. But I also watched over the years that I've been in that home, the windows be knocked out, the windows get boarded up, the doors get boarded up, the property getting broken into and vandalized over and over again, and people actually living on the front porch for periods of time. So it was bittersweet to see such a cool house and a piece of Tempe history go. But I do have to say that it was somewhat of a relief to see that and the other properties go. The other properties were much less interesting, but probably some historic value to those as well. But they were not being utilized, kept up, and it was a very sad situation, I would say, for that corner. Moving forward, I'm actually very excited to see this property come in, this development come in. I would, I'm with Phil that maybe fewer units would be better, but I understand the economics definitely come into play when you're developing a piece of property like this. I've seen your other properties, driven by them many, many times, and those are all for sale properties, and people pay good money to live in those properties because they're really beautiful properties. The landscaping is very well done. The communities are really well maintained, and I have high hopes for these as well. I see reflections of some of those other properties in this one, and I was glad to see that. Things like the pergolas that you talk about, I see those the windows up, providing light to the units. Curious thing, I didn't realize, but there's no balconies on any of these, and I don't know if that was a conscious choice or not. Yeah, please, if you have a comment.
Yes, it was a conscious choice. And I've actually been building for 40 years. And I've learned that sometimes balconies, we created the front porches, so if somebody needs to smoke in the unit, they can go out onto the front porch and smoke. What I found in the balconies, from a construction standpoint, they end up, for the cost of the balcony, becoming problems later on in life. Sometimes balconies seem to develop leaks in the waterproofing and so on and so on. But more so than that, what people end up using the balconies for is storage. Second floor balconies and stuff, they seem to be used for storage. And it's never nice to look over and see it being used for storage, whatever they put out there, boxes, various items, trash.
Right.
So I just made a choice a while ago to not do second-story balconies,
Well, I think it works for those properties.
That design and so forth.
Yeah. And I'll say, I think that's good. Thank you. I appreciate your additional input. The properties that are directly across the street, that are the 3-story units, and they have balconies, and you rarely see anyone using those balconies. So I don't have any objection to that specifically. I will make note again of something that was stated, that the parking on the street is permit parking, and so I hope that you have your contractors abide by that permit parking. And I'm just kind of letting you know that they shouldn't be parking in those spaces. So I hope that you make them aware of that. And that they respect that. I love that they're 2-story units. The other units across the street are 3-story, and that's something that I had kind of dreaded moving into that area, was that ultimately there would be 3-story buildings all surrounding us, and to see two-story units come in is a breath of fresh air. I also appreciate that 3 of the units' garages are located on the alleyway, in addition to all the visitor parking. That will alleviate some of the vehicular traffic going onto Roosevelt, which I greatly appreciate. Still going to be 7 units, I believe, which will go on to Roosevelt, but moving a little bit of that over to the alleyway was a good compromise, I think. And that's all that I had. I'll be supporting this.
Motions, comments? I'm going to just stare someone down. Yeah, there you go.
I echo some of your thoughts about the development. The area that's the concern of mine the most is on the north side. We see a lot of second-story use permits here, and this is a second story adjacent to a single-family residence on the north end. So even though it's single-family attached, we're still dealing with that single-family and more multifamily style housing right adjacent to each other. And that's also the setback that's being reduced to, I believe, 5 feet. So you're 5 feet away from a single-family residence on that north end. So that's my biggest concern with this development.
Thank you. Other comments, motions?
There's a correction. The front building, the 3-unit building there, we got that 10 feet back from the property line.
There we go, thank you.
It's only the side part of the 1 unit is closer, because that, more or less,
That's, yeah, we passed we kind of broke protocol there a little bit, but we'll stick with it now. But thank you. Yeah, I'll say, one of the things that I was interested in learning more about and seeing as we were walked through this development were the setback issues. But I will say that the purpose of our process and asking for a PAD overlay and to establish new development standards is to somehow bring us and the community a better project. So yes, we have setback requirements, that are X feet. What I saw and what I heard today was some of those setbacks in exchange for getting a little bit closer to the lot lines, especially on the 2 major streets. It allows front patios. It allows the project not to turn its back on the streets and be inward facing, but it allows us to have kind of this interplay with the sidewalks and the intersection by doing front doors and patios out front. And you have the room to do that because you gave a little bit on some of the setbacks. So for that, I feel good about giving those particular matters. Still need.
And I would agree on the
Yeah.
setbacks that are facing the
Yeah.
streets.
It's just the one adjacency with the single-family neighborhood that you rightly pointed out.
Correct.
Yeah. The other sides of this particular intersection, we have lots of 2- and 3-story existing development. So this is not like some of the infill projects that we've seen in this area before. The stuff already is there across the street. Motions, anybody, for or against? Commissioner Spears.
I move for the approval of Tempe 11 PL 220110.
I will second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded by Commissioner Spears and Commissioner Casano. Thank you. Discussion? Yes. I just wanted to, I usually ask this when the applicant is still up, just by a nod of your head, the conditions of approval you were in, you're okay with as drafted in our report? Okay. So the motion before us is with the conditions of approval that are in the report. Commissioner Lloyd.
Thank you. I just wanted to compliment the applicant in terms of the general design of the project, and also, for the most part, staying within the actual zoning and density of the neighborhood, because it's like you almost checked every box aside from some of the setbacks, instead of trying to cram as much building onto a development as possible. So I think it was nice to see some moderate density where it should be. So thank you for that.
Yes, please.
Just to make a comment about the property to the north, it's actually multifamily. There's a couple of apartments and a main house on that property. So it's not single family, but I mean, we should respect our multifamily as well, I think, when it's single story. But I just want to make that correction.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, I will call for a vote. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. And opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Members of the public, staff, as always, thank you very much for your thoughtful comments and your participation in the process. That concludes our cases for this evening. Commission members, anyone have anything you want to plug? Selling a car? No? Are you cleaning anything up this weekend that you need volunteers for? All right, tell us about it.
North side, 7 to 9 a.m. on Saturday.
And where do people meet at 7 o'clock on Saturday?
The north side of Tempe Town Lake.
Well, that's a big lake. That's like 2.5 miles of wandering.
Right on the bike path.
Okay, on the bike path closer
South
to,
of there's some overhand parking. I can't tell you exactly. KeepTempeBeautiful.org.
okay, keeptempebeautiful.org. It'll tell you all about the event.
Event.
And closer to the east or the west end of the lake are we starting? Tempe Marketplace or the Art Center?
No. Other side. It's like dead in the middle.
Oh,
Like the Marquee Theater area?
Yes.
oh, where the boat storage is and where people, okay. All right, very good. Anybody else have any announcements? No? Okay, thank you. Future agenda, let's see, our next meeting is,
Chairman, the next meeting is on September 13th, just one meeting in September.
okay,
We do have a presentation during study session. There are two projects that are being proposed, two mixed-use projects right across from Tempe Marketplace. Same developer, two planners, two different projects, so very similar looking. So that will be in the study session agenda. With that, the agenda for September 13 includes a request for a development plan review for a new 3,000 square foot drive-through restaurant for White Castle at 8755 West Warner Road. This is at the Emerald Center.
I might have heard about that one. It's gotten just a little bit of press.
We also have a request for use permit standard for a front yard setback. There's something in there. Reduction from 20 to 18 for R4 district and a development plan review for a new 3-story single-family residential development consisting of 8 units for Bernardin Lane, 8 homes on 1432 and 1435 South Bernardin Lane. This is a project that some of the commission members, you saw it a few years back, never got built, coming back again for a second round.
Okay.
And also, there is a request for use permit to intensify an existing private school, a use permit standard to increase the maximum allowed building height from 30 to 33, and a development plan review for a new 2-story building at approximately 12,850 square foot for Tempe Emmanuel Lutheran Church at 715 West Southern Avenue. Those are the projects for September 13th.
Very good. Commissioners, if you ever see where we've got material boards sitting there and I forget to have them passed around and you want to see them or touch them or feel them, stop me or just get up and grab them because I didn't notice them until just now. So there you go. All right, with that, thank you very much. Our meeting is adjourned.